boys and girls, welcome to the channel and welcome to another car review. And today we are in an E60 M5. Now for me personally, when this car came out in 2005, I was kind of disappointed for two reasons. One, the styling. It completely broke the mold. You saw the E39, you saw the heritage. With the E60, all of that went completely out of the window. But that wasn't really the main thing. The main thing for me was the fact that in Europe, when it came out, and when it came out everywhere essentially, they did not offer a manual transmission. It was only the SMG3, and that is what this car is, an SMG3. And the one thing that I didn't mind though was the engine, because it's the glorious V10, and the noises that this thing makes under full acceleration, well, you heard it at the beginning of the review, that's second to none. And now that we're in the future, we're talking 2019 now, 10 years after the last one, almost 10 years after the last one rolled off the assembly lot, we know that the F10 came out and it went twin turbocharged V8. So it dropped 2 cylinders and it started to use magic to get to bigger horsepower numbers. And it kind of lost, well, that thing that the original M5s had. Naturally aspirated, high revving, all that good stuff. Of course, over here we're gonna get into a turn, downshift over here. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it turns very, very nice. The car's also heavy, over 2 tons. Goodness, see, this is what it's about. I say it a lot when it comes down to cars like these, but goodness, the sound that this car makes. It only has a muffler delete too, and that's the crazy thing. A muffler delete makes it sound awesome. Now on this transmission, if you read up about these cars, you know that they end up having issues. If you want this car, it's best to find a manual, but those are very, very rare. You only have about 1,400 of them. But for some reason, I do enjoy this transmission because it has a single clutch. It's not like a dual clutch unit where the second gear is already in play. You press the button and boom, it's in second gear. It's like the Huracans. Boom, 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 boom. This one doesn't do that. This one has that delay, that has that kind of that analog that you have with the manual transmission, which personally, I like that kind of stuff. If you have to compare it to like supercars, you have to think about like the Gallardo with the E-gear, because that was single clutch. And if you're going to go just a little bit upscale, Murcielago, and even the Aventador nowadays, same thing. The brakes are actually very good on this also. The way this thing accelerates, oh goodness. And the sound, it's also like it's almost effortlessly as well, because it just goes on a sea of torque. Now this engine produces 500 horsepower and 384 pound-feet of torque, and all of that, the lion's share, is in the top end of the rev range. So it really starts making real big power the harder you rev. And this car also redlines at 8250. That's amazing. It's a 5-liter V10 that shifts at 8250 RPM. I mean, that is nuts. That's just, it's crazy how this thing accelerates. It is such a visceral feeling. I kid you not. This is actually also the first time that I am experiencing a V10 car. And it's strange because when you look at the outside of this, you go, what? There's a V10 noise coming from a freaking sedan. To bring up the engine, it's actually F1 derived. It was built in the heyday, at least in my opinion, of F1 when the V10s and V12s were still around. Even just those little downshifts sounds awesome. And you hear that too. When you get on it, you hear that wail, that sound of the old school F1s. Okay, the F1 of course revs way higher than this, but this is also a street car. This is a street car, it's a sedan, and it sounds like a Formula One car. I mean, it's amazing. It is freaking amazing. Now, when you talk about the exterior styling now, knowing what we know, it makes a lot more sense because it bridged the gap between old school and new school. And it's especially evident, in my opinion, with the front headlights. The original ones, they didn't really have them molded at all. This one does. And in my opinion, that is one of the most amazing things in the world, that you can see that, okay, we have to change things up. We are no longer living in the past. We are living in the future, and the future is having more slick bodies. And this car is about as slick as it gets when it comes down to looking at it from every angle. There's not a single angle on this that it is flat. It all has, well, bubbly goodness. It's almost like the 90s came back. And I love it when you just take off slowly. The transmission takes its time to shift. It's showing you, hey, you know what? Nice and lazy, we're good. And you feel all that power that you have. You feel that just starting to move you forward. It lets you know, hey, I have a whole lot more to offer, but you don't have to. Right now we're at 60 miles an hour and we're tacking just over $2,000, which is very, very nice. Especially knowing that this is such a high-strung engine that revs that high. And it's happy here. There's no bucking, nothing. It is freaking glorious. Now, the interesting thing on this car is when you start it up, it starts automatically in 400 horsepower mode, which incidentally is the same amount of power that the E39 made. Now, of course, I've been driving around in 500 horsepower mode. I do wonder, though, what's going to happen if I go to 400 horsepower mode, that pedestrian mode? Will it feel that much slower? Will it all of a sudden become not fun to drive? Let's see. So now we're in 400 horsepower mode, and you instantly feel power being taken away, which is very, very eerie. And it's not a feeling that you want, because the opposite side, you feel the power being added. So let's go through this corner over here, and then we'll mat it at the bottom. Noticeable difference. It's not like it's freaking slow or anything like that, but you just feel that there is something missing. That's not for us.
Well, you never know. Yeah, that's kind of underwhelming. As soon as you've experienced 500 horsepower, the 400 horsepower setting is really not what you want to be in, but for just daily driving, I think it would be completely fine. It's not slow by any means. This car will whoop my car into 400 horsepower mode. And of course, I only have 300 horsepower, but you get what I mean. So now we're just cruising along, and if I hit that M button right now, instantly, you just feel, it's like the secondaries in an old school carburetor. It just opens up and go, okay, I'm awake now. Here you go, 500 horsepower on top, here we go. And this is 100% the most fun you can have in this thing. I mean, just downshifting, going back in gears, getting on the brakes just a little bit, second gear. You just hear it just a little bit. I mean, this thing it pulls so hard and so linear. This is what it's like having no turbochargers. It is just freaking amazing. Now, when you talk about the exterior styling, the #1 styling cue that I've always loved, and this car freaking nails, is the quad exhaust. I mean, it is just such a cool thing to look at, and it's pretty much all you'll be looking at if you're not in one of these cars, because the top end on these was electronically limited to 155 miles an hour. But delimited, some cars have seen 200 miles an hour, and that's just amazing, because you have to think this is 10 years ago. This is pretty much the fastest sedan when it came out, and that's saying something. Now, another thing to mention about the exterior styling is, of course, the color. You never see these in blue. I always see them in silver and black. And when you go over to the interior styling of the car, it is German, it is business-like, it's no frills, and I like it. Also, the infotainment system is freaking huge. Cars of this era really started getting into this stuff. They started to create the stuff that you have now in regular cars. I mean, this screen is as huge as the ones that you see in the newer Chargers. Another thing that I love about the interior on this car are these seats. They hug you so nicely in the corner. I mean, the side bolstering is perfect. Some of the other cars, they have the active side bolstering. This does not, but do you really need it? I don't think so, because this holds you in place perfectly. Now, of course, someone's gonna mention the freaking headliner coming loose, but you have to remind yourself about something. This is now essentially a 10-year-old car. It's a 2008. It's actually older than that. So, while we get in this corner and get that side bolstering thing going, and I'm not in the right gear at all, and I don't mind. I bet if you get on it now, it still goes. Let's do it. It's its fourth gear, effortlessly, and there it goes. And that's only 4.5 grand RPMs. I mean, this is... Oh. Doesn't get better than this. It pulls like a freaking freight train, this thing. I mean, it is amazing. Yeah, so the headlight, it's something that you can replace. Now in the exterior, someone else is probably gonna mention the headlights going, oh, well, it's broken too. It's a 10-year-old car, and that happens. This is Texas. Texas gets hot. You have a car in the sun, stuff that's glued on is going to fail. That is just a fact of life. Now in cars like these, the only really thing you have to worry about is the engine good? Is the transmission good, this SMG? And the rest, you can fix that later. That kind of stuff, it's like the least expensive stuff that you will mess around with on this car. Now, another thing you have to talk about the interior, which I always found a very cool thing, and I wish more cars had it, is shades in the back. It has rear window shades, and the side windows rear also have shades on them. So if you have a family, you got kids, you got a baby back there, that sun is not going to be an issue like it would be in most cars, and I think that is very cool. And that brings me to a following point. I would take this on a road trip for sure, 100%. If I have to give you a conclusion on this car, it's a very simple one. I love it to death, but I know the problems that this has, and because of that, I would not own one unless I had the warranty with it. But other than that, this is essentially the reason why you would find one with a warranty, and maybe a manual transmission. And this is why you get one of these. Naveed, thank you so much for sharing this awesome experience with me. This is so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this car review as much as I enjoyed driving this M5, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Woo!